Light Talk. Reuben Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Reuben Brothers. Light Talk.
Hello and welcome to Light Talk. This is Stan, and I'm broadcasting from my state-of-the-art studio in the swamps of Gainesville, Florida.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas.
And this is David, broadcasting in the beautiful Belmont Shore area of Long Beach, California. And we are the Lubin Brothers. Well, hey guys, last week was a huge week for events.
Huge? How huge was it?
It's a huge week of events for Light Talk. Unbelievable. I mean,
I don't think it means much.
it's a big news week. I think it
Okay.
means a lot. First
right.
of all, last week we blew past 30,000 downloads. 30,000. Do you know what
Yeah,
that?
but if you divide that by 49, it's not so much.
Yeah, thanks, Stan.
Good evening from Light Talk.
This is Stan putting a downer on the 30,000 download announcement. Anyway, I remember when we hit 10,000. You guys remember that? That was a
That
big
was a biggie.
milestone.
That was huge.
20,000 came. We didn't say anything.
We're getting desensitized.
I'm totally desensitized. So 30,000, big deal. Okay. And then our Facebook group, the membership, we blew past 800 a couple of weeks ago, and now we're on its way to 1,000. 1,000 people actually come to our Light Talk Facebook group page. That is pretty damn cool. And we've got we have some celebrities on there now, which is cool too.
Celebrities?
Yeah, there's celebrities
Who?
on there. Well, Mr. Perlman's on there. It's celebrity, right?
Oh, I bet most of the students don't know who Mr. Perlman is.
Well, they will find out soon.
Or now we have Mr. Rubin also, and they probably don't know who he is.
No, they don't know. Well, who knows?
Right.
Okay.
Well, they're gonna find out.
All right, great. So that's pretty cool. And on April 6th, which is in 2 weeks, is our 52nd episode. And do you know what 52nd episodes mean, Stanley?
It means that there's 52 weeks in the year,
That's
so we have to
right.
do something.
So we have to do something because that's our first anniversary episode. We are still coming up with ideas. Our listeners are flooding us with suggestions.
Really, will you share those with me? Because
Most
I'm
of them
not
we can't
saying it.
share on the air because they are not. Like, you know what you should do? You guys should stop. Stop at 52. No, anyway, but
You know, Jerry Seinfeld did that. He knew when to
Yep,
to stop.
yep, that's
Don't
right.
jump the shark. Go out when you're ahead.
You quit while you're ahead, you know?
That's right.
So, yeah, so that's really cool. But we also have some really cool interviews coming up. So, Stan, why don't you tell our listeners about them?
Yeah, I'd like to. So on April 21st of 2018, we'll have a well-known guy and a terrific programmer who actually wrote the book, or one of the first books on programming, named Brad Schiller. And Brad is now currently working for Martin Professional. And then on May 12th, we have a pretty famous scenographer named Neil Peter Jampoulis, who, when I was growing up in the 80s, like in New York, he was doing like every Broadway show. Every time you turned around, there was another Neil Jampoulis show. So he's going to join us on the 12th. And then on June 2nd, one of the most prolific projection designers in North America, we will have Miss Elaine McCarthy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, Neil was the first person who hired me out of grad school.
Well, we didn't want to tell them that.
That's true. Well, he wasn't as wise back then as he is now.
Yeah, he's smarter now.
He's a lot smarter now. And Neil also runs the program at UCLA, so that's it's pretty cool. So Neil is very funny, and he has the most terrific beaver coat I've ever seen in my life.
Hey, and you know what? He let me wear it. There's a picture of me at Erda's with the beaver coat on. And by the way, to get more information about these interviews, I want to direct our listeners to our website, which Steve has been doing a great job of keeping up to date. And that website address is www.lighttalk.org. And that's Light Talk with 2 T's, lighttalk.org.
Yeah, no space. 2 T's, no space. Light Talk.
Yeah,
one
we
word.
We were economical.
They're
in
very
that. That's
economical.
right.
Light Talk. So let's get on with our listener questions. So Steve's got the first question.
One.
We have a question from Emily in Washington, D.C., and she says, can you explain the difference between low-key lighting and high-key lighting? All right, let me make a stab at this and be fairly succinct with it. High-key lighting is a type of lighting that you're going to see in film and television and photography, and it aims to reduce the lighting ratio present in the scene. It was originally done partly for technological reasons, since early film and television cameras didn't deal with high contrast. Usually when you see high-key lighting, you're going to find that in upbeat sitcoms, comedies, that type of thing. Typically in high-key lighting, it is devoid of dark shadows. And so when you say high-key lighting, what you're referring to are scenes that possess lots of whites and light tones, a complete range of those. Again, the terminology comes from the higher balance in the ratio between key light and fill light in the traditional three-point lighting setup. These images have very minimal midtones and blacks. So if you use high-key lighting, let's say in photography, the midtones in the mid-range are going to become white, and the whites are going to become even whiter. Now, if you want to see good examples of this, you could take a look at something like Clint Eastwood's movie Million Dollar Baby, The Wizard of Oz, Dirty Harry, The Big Lebowski. You're going to find really good examples of high-key lighting in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the scene in which Harry and Dumbledore are both in the afterlife. You're going to find some of these scenes in Lord of the Rings as a contrast to low-key lighting. And low-key lighting is exactly the opposite of high-key lighting. Low-key lighting is trying to use darker tones, shadows, and black, really deep ones, to create a kind of dramatic effect. And this comes from actually the Renaissance, and it comes from a type of art that was by Leonardo da Vinci and Rembrandt called chiaroscuro. And that is a type of painting in which dark shadows, dark tones are examined by the artist. Really good example of low-key movies, The Third Man, A Touch of Evil, Sin City. Take a look at almost any of the Batman movies, Casablanca. So when you see low-key lighting, usually they're pushing tragedy. They're pushing something very somber, very ominous. And if you want to see a movie that has both high-key and low-key lighting and done extremely well, take a look at Dustin Hoffman's film, All the President's Men.
Good film.
Wow, Steve, you answered that so beautifully. I don't think I can add anything, but I will make a confession that I didn't know those terms in that way. So I did my research, and one little note that I discovered, because I can't really add too much to what you said, but that the brightness ratio in high key, I found 8:1 ratio, and in low key, in high key, 1:1 ratio.
That's fascinating. You know something? I mean, isn't that like film noir? Wouldn't that be low key lighting, Steve?
Yeah.
In fact, film noir, if you want to be a complete film geek, most film historians will tell you A Touch of Evil was the very last film noir movie made with Orson Welles. But sure, that's a really good example of that. Take a look, Casablanca, The Thin Man, The Big Sleep, all of that stuff is low key. And certainly
would Metropolis fit into that too?
It might. I think the thing, if you want to look at low-key lighting, then all you have to look at, in addition to film noir, take a look at all that German expressionism that was going on.
Right.
Yeah,
Metropolis.
Sure,
yeah.
Absolutely.
We've used some of these films as reverse engineered lighting studies for our architectural lighting class, where the students pick some scenes and then they reverse engineer how they were lit and try and figure out what the light plot was.
And if you ever watch Metropolis, do not get it with the updated soundtrack. Get it with the original music. That's all I have to say about that. Anyway, next question. David. Well, that's me. There's
That's you, David.
That's
Your name
David,
is
but
David,
there's
isn't
also
it? Isn't
David too. This place is crazy with Davids. Yeah. Okay. David in Wisconsin asks, what is better, knowing the rig or knowing the show? All right.
Well, I don't know how you can do anything without knowing both.
Both. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to tell you about a recurring nightmare I have. I've had this nightmare for like the past 30 years. And I'm somewhere. I show up somewhere at some gig. There's a giant set on stage with lights all hung. And I just show up and I realize that the first dress rehearsal is at that night. That evening, the show's opening tomorrow, and I haven't focused one light. I do not know I don't know the rig, and I do not know the show.
Is that a recurring
This
nightmare?
is a recurring nightmare. I have it about 4 or 5 times a year.
You're making this up.
No, I swear. This is true.
Really?
I've had this nightmare, and it is the most horrible nightmare. And of course, someone, one of my good friends is directing the show. It's either Paul or Ken. And I'm like saying, oh my God, what am I going to tell Paul? It's like just a stress dream, I also have a dream about trying to catch a flight out of there or out of someplace, and I miss my plane all the time. But that has nothing. But anyway, get back to the question. It is important. You need to know both. You absolutely. And I don't think you can know one better than the other. Maybe the show. I think it's always important to know the show, because a lot of us could sit down at a rig that's already been designed that we didn't design. And if we know the show and then we watch we test the rig and we see where the lights are focused or, what type of movers are in there or whatever, then we can actually design it. But if you sit down at a show and you know the rig, but you don't know the show, you can't do anything. So I'm going to go back on my answer and say it is better to know the show, because you can, if you know the show, whatever tools you have, I'm sure you can design it. But if you don't know the show, it doesn't matter what you have.
I think you're right. I think it's hard if you don't know the show, you're sort of like, what are you doing? Doesn't matter what the rig is. But at the same time, if you let's say you're working in a rep situation and you know the rig really, really well, whatever comes in, you might be able to make look decent. But I don't think you can get design out of it. Choices, really, really smart, insightful choices, unless you know the show.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
My dream is the perfect storm of this question, because really I don't know either one, and I didn't see the show because it's like final dress rehearsal, so it really is the perfect storm of the question and or answer of the question. I just think that you actually need to know the show. It doesn't matter. You need to know the show. What do you think, Steve?
Absolutely, you have to know the show. Knowing the rig is not that important. A good designer can walk in, a good programmer can walk in and figure out the rig in 30 minutes. And, if they're good at what they do, an hour later, they've got a show put together, a busking show put together. But if you don't know the music, if you don't know the set, then you're dead in the water. You just don't know. You just don't know what's leading to what.
Yeah, let me add one more thing, and then we can move on. It's sort of like, and I'm a musician, and sometimes I go to these jam sessions. I go to a club, and there's a keyboard rig on stage, and sometimes I've never played that keyboard, but I do know the songs, right? So I can go up there, and with that keyboard, no matter what it is, even if it's an accordion, I can make something happen because I know the music, right? I know the show, so I know the music. However, if I don't know the song, it doesn't matter if I have a Steinway up there, it's not going to sound good.
I was going to say, we have actually a question coming up that deals with this from Carla in New Orleans. And one of the things she wants us to explore is how someone at a club who doesn't know the music ruins the evening for everyone.
Been there, done that.
I thought of another analogy that's not related to art, but in my younger days, I was an auto mechanic, and you can buy really, really great snap-on tools, and you can have really great tools, but if you don't know how an engine works, you can have all the tools in the world, and you can't diagnose or fix that engine just because you have the tools. You got to know how engines work, so you got to know the play. You got to know this. You got to know what's going on. Well, I have a question here that Corey Lee in Indiana wants to know. And he says, what is the best way to deal with or prevent burnout? And then Martinez Magnuson in Norway kind of followed up on that and said, I think learning the signs of when to say no and communicating with coworkers are two important points here. Preventing burnout, I think this is an endurance business. So you're going to have a lot of stamina. I think like teaching is a high stamina business, and arts are a high stamina business. So you sort of have to have that in you in the first place, is high stamina. If you're getting to a point where you are really experiencing significant either mental or physical conditions that are affecting you in a negative way, then I think you have to sort of be honest with yourself about what's going on. When to say no, here's how I judge it. If I'm being asked to do something that's going to put me at risk, so maybe I can give an example. I'm in negotiations on a project right now, and it's a consulting gig. And the way it was presented to me is you're going to be involved for these 2 phases of work, and after that we don't need you anymore. And I look at the project and I'm going, that's not going to be good for my reputation, because I know that if I'm not on this project from the beginning to the end, after phase 2, the phone's going to start ringing. And if I'm not contracted past phase 2, I'm not going to answer the phone. And if I don't answer the phone, the project's going to get screwed up, and my name's going to be on it. So I've gone back, and I didn't say no, okay, but I needed to sort of correct this. So I said to the entity who was hiring me, I will take the same fee that you would give me for the first 2 phases and spread it across the whole project. So I am there from beginning to end, because I value my reputation more than anything else. And if I can't get that, I would walk, because my reputation has a higher value than the job. And so that person didn't ask me. I didn't get to the point where I'd have to say no. They completely understood. It was communicating clearly, honestly, and taking, doing what I needed to do on my end so that I could say yes. And that person understood that.
Yeah, I think we've all hit this sort of spot in our careers. You don't hit it as much when you're young. Depends on how many jobs you're working. But I'm certainly hitting it now. And I couldn't believe it. I think I said in a previous episode, I designed like 14 shows last year, which is a lot of shows when you're also teaching. And I got burned out in January. A lot of other things are happening in my life. My mom was ill. A lot was going on. And that takes a lot of energy out of you too. And, I was just offered this show in Turkey, and I turned it down because I knew it was going to be just crazy. I have a show opening this week in L.A. that I just decided not to do. I'm having my, it's a remount, and I'm having my associate from Chicago do it because I knew that I couldn't, if I did it, I'd probably end up in the hospital. So you really need to know when to say no. It's hard early on, because I always tell my students, and you've heard it on the show, never turn down a gig, right? When you're young, never turn down a gig, because you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what's going to happen. It's probably going to be, you may think, it's going to be a terrible show. It turns out to be a great show. Sometimes you think a great show, it turns out it could be a terrible show. So you don't know. So you got to go and try it, get in there and meet these people. But when you're older and you're more established, you got to be careful.
No, I agree. I had 2 shows opening in Europe back to back, and it was really stressful. And I thought I have a week between one show opening, and I have to travel to another point to go into the load-in for another show. And it was one of the most stressful things I've done. And I'm never going to do that again. The money is not worth it.
Nope.
It turned out all right, but it also could have gone really south. It's not a good thing. I think saying no is important. It's as important as saying yes.
I might throw this out there. He asked about, David, what are the signs? Like, what are the red flags? What are the warnings? I'm thinking of something that's a little bit humorous. And it wasn't a theater project. It was a consulting project for a church. And we were involved, and the project was growing, and we were in negotiations. And, we had done some preliminary work. And we went into this building that was going to get renovated, And somehow we were in the entry area. We were talking about the restrooms or how are we going to light the lobby and whatever it was. And the person who was there said, "Oh, no, I think you're really going to need an architect if you're really going to renovate this space." And the guy said, "Oh, no, we don't need an architect. The pastor's going to design it, and you guys are going to make it." And I went, "So the pastor is going to design the bathrooms," and that was the sign when I knew this was going to be a micromanaged prod. There are people have roles, people have expertise. There are engineers, there are architects, there are line designers, there are set design. People have expertise, and if we're not going to respect those expertise, then I kind of went, we're not doing this project.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? And I won't tell the details of the church because it did have national notoriety for not such nice reasons. But it just became. And so you know what? You can go hire an AV company and they'll put up a screen. They'll put some lights in for you, and they will do what you need and they'll work with you. But that's not the kind of work that we do. And I just knew it wasn't the right kind of project for us. And so it is sort of, you got to look for those signs. Or here's my classic. We want a really great project. We don't have a lot of money, and we're in a hurry.
The 3 deadly sins.
There's 3 for you right there. There's the big signs. We don't have a lot of money. Flag number 1.
Right.
We
Red
want
flag.
it to be really great. Flag number 2.
Confetti cannon.
And we need it done. And we need it done by next week.
That's when the pyro goes off. No,
that's when the flags start flying.
It's like unbelievable. I don't know sometimes, how we miss these flags because, I missed the flag a few months ago. And I said, "How the
missing
hell did
the
I
flag?
miss?" Missing the flag. That should be our title. But
There it is.
it's weird. I mean, how do we miss this? We've done like hundreds and hundreds of shows. How did that happen? 99% of the time we see the flags. We actually do. I mean, it's like, oh, come on, that ain't gonna happen.
I think I've said this before. Your greatest liability is your client, is the person hiring you. So evaluate the person hiring you as carefully as anything you would do.
Keep your eyes open, see the flags, and pay attention to them, and ask questions. Because if something doesn't seem right, ask the question and say, "Who's taking care of this?"
You are listening to Light Talk with Steve, Stan, and David, the Lumen Brothers. And this week, Light Talk is sponsored by...
Hey, kittens. Are you getting a little long in the tooth to scamper around a truss? Has your waistline expanded to the point that, you just don't fit anymore? Or has that wire rope ladder become just a little too hard to climb? Well then, all the way from China, Illegitimate Panda introduces the Truss Monkey. That's right, let the Truss Monkey do those jobs you can't. For only $49.95, Illegitimate Panda, working hand in hand with Greenpeace, will send you an adorable, well-trained capuchin monkey. Considered to be the smartest monkey on the planet, they can be trained to coil cable, use hand tools, and throw feces at the sound crew.
Yeah.
Basically the stuff you already do. In fact, the capuchin monkey can learn just about anything. You can even train that little bugger to count your per diem. No kidding. They actually can be trained to use money. So, when the mover refuses to strike or that truss follow spot operator falls asleep and needs to be smacked, unleash the Truss Monkey. Remember, insist on the original. Insist on the Truss Monkey. Tiny little toolkit, gloves, and safety harness optional.
Oh, that's cute. That's
truss,
adorable.
The Truss Monkeys reminds me of that old Richard Pryor routine about his pet monkey. I'm not going to go into it because it is kind of off color, but it's a great bit.
I just got to say, now, back to Light Talk.
Okay, we actually had a follow-up from episode 48. And in that episode, we talk about moving to New York and not being an electrician, just be a designer, but maybe you want to invest in a console so you can supplement your income by designing a show and then renting your console to the theater. So Simon Farrow sent us a note, and he says, "What's your opinion on the $250 Nomad student deal from ETC? Would that be a good console to buy for students who are graduating and looking to continue in the business?" My vote is no on that, Simon. And I think, what you might want to consider is looking at a used console. And what I would suggest is the Grand MA Ultralight. Take a look at Generation 1. What you're going to find is, a lot of people are selling Gen 1 Grand MA consoles for about $1,500. And I actually think that's pie in the sky. I think that price is going to drop below $1,000 in a few months. With the Gen 2 and now the Gen 3 out there, it's a great console. It does everything you want it to do. It's fairly flexible, and you have all the buttons and knobs and encoders you're going to need. So I think putting together kind of a PC-based console is not such the best idea, because you're going to need a computer, probably your laptop to drive it, and you're not going to want to rent your Nomad and your laptop to a theater. So look at used equipment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Nomad's great for some things. I got one in my office. I've got one in my little light lab, but I wouldn't think of it as a console to rent.
$1,500 for an MA Generation 1. I think that's a great deal, And like Steve said, it'd be less.
You can probably find the same deals on, earlier generations of ETC equipment. I mean, now they've got the new Ion out. They have,
it's true.
The new EOS. They have, actually I saw an Obsession 600 for sale for $500.
Wow. I don't know about the Obsession.
Just the aluminum alone. That's the
That's right. Now, especially now, the aluminum's going to be worth a lot of money.
Well, and Simon needs to also think about a console that he can get in the back of a cab or on a bus or certainly on the subway.
Or on a plane. You going to check that thing?
Well, he's probably not going to take a console out to Colorado with him. He's kicking around New York.
Oh, that's true.
Where is Simon?
Oh yeah, he's in New York. He really wanted to follow up on our discussion about how can I make a little extra money with a console. He hadn't thought of that.
Oh my God, he took us seriously?
Absolutely.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
He didn't hear the disclaimer.
But yeah, if you're going to buy something used, you do have to be a little careful. You just got to make sure that you're not buying something that's totally obsolete. And I'm going to do a little shout out here, and I'm going to need your help, guys. On Facebook, there are several groups that we post to that actually, one's lighting designers. I know that. There's another one that's used lighting hardware or something like that. But it's really important. You can find really good deals from private sellers on Facebook. I've seen them pop up every now and then.
That's cool.
You guys know the names of those groups?
I don't, but that's
offhand?
cool.
Yeah. So I know on the Lighting Designers Facebook group page, which has like a ridiculous amount of people. It's like 20,000. I don't know. It's really outrageous. We have like 800, 900. We're like going crazy, and they've got like thousands and thousands. I love it. You can find out there. You just check it out and see. Because I just saw something the other day. Someone was selling MA.
Well, he could also just wander by PRG in New York and just tell them what he has in mind and get some feedback from those guys.
Right, they may have one. They'll sell you.
Exactly. So, what I used to work at Production Arts, and oftentimes we would sell off stuff that we took good care of, but we weren't really renting that much. So, find out what's in their rental inventory and what they might be willing to let go of. So, Tracy in France asks, "Do you prefer a stage manager or a show control system?" Yes. I do. I just have one story. I'm not very deeply steeped in show control, but I was fortunate once to watch a Disney event in Orlando called Fantasmic, and it was a humongous outdoor thing with water and projections and lighting and lifts and fountains and just everything you can possibly imagine. And watching these guys run that thing, and there was a stage manager, but the sequences were so tight that for the tight, everything was on show control, and the stage manager started the event, and all the different computers that ran all the different elements came back to a show controller, and that show controller had every step it went through it, and the stage manager could abort at any time or override. So there was a stage manager involved, but it was just simply too complex for a human to call. So I think it depends upon the application. but you still want a stage manager there, even if you are running show control.
Yeah. When I used to work at Disney, we did the same thing. I don't know if they're still doing it now, but yeah, there's always a stage manager. And listen, I like to have someone human in charge. Ever since I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, I just don't trust computers that much.
Now, let me give you the opposite. So
Okay.
at NASA, where they have if you haven't been to Kennedy Space Center recently, I highly recommend it. And in particular, the new space shuttle ride, which is a launch, which is incredible. But you go into these, when you go into the Saturn V building, you open, these doors open up, you walk into this big open space, and the doors shut, and there's a film, and then it's completely automated, and it's initiated by essentially a security guard. I mean, the security guard pushes a button, the doors open, everybody gets in. When everybody's settled, she pushes the button, the doors close, and the sequence starts. Now, I don't know whether there's somebody watching that, but that thing runs every 45 minutes, and it's, there's probably a way to sort of send a message if something fails, but I don't think there's anybody calling those things. So I don't know if we're getting into the things that Tracy really wanted to talk about, but I think we're saying it's both have their place.
No, we haven't talked about what Tracy wants to talk about. I'm here for you, Tracy. I'm here.
Go, Steve.
Once again, we went out on talking about something totally different.
We went out of bounds. Out of bounds.
Go, Steve.
No,
Out of
well,
bounds.
what I think, here's what I think, and that is it's Tracy in France, Tracy in Europe. And there's a different tradition with stage managers in the United States and Europe. I've used show control systems in Europe, and I've had no problems with them. And I still have a human being involved. So that tradition that we have of a stage manager calling every light cue, calling every sound cue, calling every fly cue, I don't think that tradition necessarily is as rich in France as it is in, New York City. So I think more and more show control systems are taking things over. And one of the reasons they take things over is they're simply more precise. So if I'm running, a Moliere comedy, then probably I need a stage manager there. But if I'm running a rock and roll show, if I'm running an ice show, if I'm doing something at the museum, if I have a ballet going, show control is just fine. So I think there's room for both. But I'm finding show control is working better and better and better because I'm not having to worry about the skill level of a stage manager not being up to snuff for the show. So, I like stage managers. If I have a really good one, then absolutely they're an equal partner. But if I have a stage manager who's just not so well trained, it's a real rough evening in the theater.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Do you think that we'll see a reduction as we move forward in the calling of the shows sort of being given up by the stage management into these computerized systems over time?
I think there's going to be room for both. There's absolutely going to be room for both, and I think it's simply application. Which one provides a better
for the job, right?
Yeah, a better deal for the client for the particular production they're working on.
Right. And on the other side of the coin, in Italy, the stage manager does not call the light cues. There's a separate stage manager that calls all the light cues, and that stage.
What's their title?
Maestro de Luce.
Wow, Master of the Light.
The Master of the Lights and the Maestro of the Lights, exactly. And they're just reading everything off a score. And sometimes it's a little difficult because sometimes they come in late. They haven't watched the show and they don't know. Not everything comes off the score. There are a lot of visual cues as well.
Is that like a real narrow specialty that's all they do? Sort of like if you're like a ship that's navigating, when you go on a cruise, like when I went to Alaska and we're going up this fjord to see this iceberg, glacier, they fly this captain onto the boat, and the main captain steps away, and the port captain comes in, and he just guides the ship. So is that sort of similar? Is this person really just all they do?
Yeah, sometimes they're rehearsal pianists. Sometimes they know very little about light. A lot of times they do know a lot about light. It's just a different person who does that, which kind of drives me bats.
So they're not with you. They're not.
They're in a totally different place. They're in a totally different place. I mean, they sit next to me when I'm programming the show to make sure it goes in the book correctly, although I usually have most of the cues already located. And when they call the show, they're not backstage with the stage manager. They're usually off somewhere. And this can be very tricky when you're doing scene shifts that are quite complex, where you have to have the light cue and the rail cue go at the same time with sound cue, whatever. So it's like, I wish the stage manager's calling this. So yeah, that's something that's just a tradition, and they've kept it because of the tradition. Now, there's also show control in Europe as well, as we know. But yeah, I mean, the lighting is usually called by a person just dedicated to call the lighting.
The bulk of opera that I've done, I've always had a cue caller who is working from a conductor score.
Yep.
They're not taking blocking notes.
Nope.
And a few years ago, our cue caller became ill and simply could not call the show, and they brought in a stage manager from the local musical theater company that was certainly, it's an equity professional house. But they brought this stage manager in thinking, how hard can it be? And I remember things just fell apart, and I walked backstage, and the stage manager was feverishly flipping through the score, looking at the stage, looking at the score. You can read music, but that doesn't mean you can read a conductor score, nor can you call a show. And this stage manager was used to, Bill walks across the stage and halfway across the stage call the cue. No, that's not what it is in opera.
No, it's not. But if you explain to them what it is, that that's a visual cue. It's got to move at this, be called at this point. Yeah, they can handle that. But if they haven't been sitting in rehearsals for 6 weeks, sometimes it's hard for them to catch up. And so, yeah, that's how it works in a lot of places. So anyway, guys, that Hammond organ solo in the background tells us that once again, you've spent a precious 40 minutes of your life listening to Light Talk. Look for the next episode of Light Talk here on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Spotify, or the Light Talk Facebook group page. And while there, post your comments and questions, and be sure to subscribe to Light Talk. That way you will not miss 1 second of Lumen insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
In other words, do not repel from the grid.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And don't forget to keep those questions and topics coming. You can email us at David, Stan, or Steve at lighttalk.org.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss what is the best way to make lightning. Our school has 2 ancient follow spots called satellite tubes. Ancient indeed. What can I do to make them quiet? Well, what can you do to make them bright? And why don't fluorescent lamps get super hot like other arc lamps?
All that and a new sponsor.
We'll see all of you next week. Same time, same channel.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye from Light
Bye-bye,
Talk.
Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk.
Nice.